Excited. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Tuesday Talks. I'm your host, Kim Riley, founder of the Transition Academy, a disability college and career planning center. And I am really excited to be with you today and to also to share with you some really good information. We talk so much about kind of when we talk about disabilities, the focus seems to be on cuteness and little kids issues, but we have got to talk about the next stages of life. Before we jump right in, I'll give you a little bit of history. We started the first edition of Tuesday Talks on March 31st. Basically in response to COVID. We knew that the rest of the country and the world were reeling, and that we in the disability community, we tend to be forgotten, and we were determined that we were going to lean on and learn from one another. And so Tuesday Talks was formed as a way of keeping the disability community connected during COVID-19 and beyond. Our agenda is pretty simple. We devote the first half of our meetings to a presentation from a presenter on a topic, and then the second half to resource sharing. We definitely deviate. Sometimes the presentation goes long and the resource sharing goes short, but all in all, we keep it at 1 hour or less. And we are so excited to hear from this week's presenter, Ms. Jaclyn Kotowski. Jaclyn is a special ed teacher at Guadalupe Center Charter School, and she is a transition expert. Welcome, Jaclyn. And we are excited to have you here today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So Jaclyn, could you tell us about yourself and how you got interested in special education and specifically in transition?
Yeah, so I just finished my 7th year as a special education teacher at Guadalupe Centers. From the beginning, I kind of noticed that there wasn't anybody focusing on transition. So even though it's a requirement of the IEP, there wasn't necessarily one person who was really focused on it. So kind of even in my first year of teaching, I had seniors, and so I kind of had to learn while on the job. And then I started to get more interested in how I could be more effective. I did some research through like the Transition Coalition and just kind of doing some reading. And then in 2018, I found the Transitions Masters at University of Kansas, KU. And so I decided to enroll in that program. That way I could be better at coordinating and planning and really being more effective at helping students to reach their post-secondary goals. And also to influence my school and the decisions that we make, and then hopefully also the Kansas City area.
Right. We are so fortunate. I know I did not realize how much coursework and the depth and scope that University of Kansas offers. Also, I'm a Mizzou grad, so it just pains my heart to give KU too many props, but I had to give credit where credit is due. Can you kind of talk us through that coursework and what that journey was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are not many master's programs specifically focusing on transitions. I had people in the program. It was mostly online, so that way I could teach at the same time. But I had people from all over the country. There was people from Georgia, people from Virginia, of course, people from this area as well. But that kind of speaks to the quality of the program that it reaches across the nation. So the course is kind of focused on 8 domains of transition. So again, coming from the focusing on the school aspect and the IEP aspect. So they had 8 domains, and each course was focused on a specific domain. So we had transition planning, we had assessments, we have family involvement, we have secondary academic programming, community reference curriculum, career development, interagency collaboration, and then leadership and policy. Mm-hmm. So for each of those domains, I took a course on it. It was an accelerated program, so I was taking 2 or 3 courses at one time, and they were it was like a mini semester. So basically, I would take 4 in a semester, and then each one usually had a project. Sorry.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. I'm sorry. Would it be helpful for our attendees if we could go to the website and show your portfolio?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to suggest that.
Okay, that's cool. I just, as you were talking, I was like, I just love your site, and to visually see the thought and intentionality that you placed was absolutely incredible. You can share, I can share screens with you. You can easily pull it up if you want to or know how to, or I can do it on this end.
Yes, it has at the host disabled screen sharing, so I think you might have to.
Now, you know, I do not need, want, or deserve that much power, Jaclyn, okay? I am just going to, let's see.
There's usually like an arrow next to the green share screen button. And if you click on that, it should say like allow participants to share.
Ah, nice. Okay, I did just push that.
All right, I can share now. Perfect. And whoops. Here we go. Okay, so you should now be able to see the transitions portfolio. So this was my culminating project. So basically my thesis, we did a website and it has artifacts and resources. So it is just my name because again, it was for a course thing, so I didn't purchase a domain, but I can go ahead and post this in the chat if anybody needs, well.
That'll be perfect.
Here we go. Okay, so if we look in the portfolio, you guys should be able to see my screen. If you notice that there are all of the different domains that I kind of just listed. So I'm going to go ahead and go to family involvement because I think that one applies the most to the Transition Academy. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. So the way all of these are set up is the first part kind of talks about research. So the research component of what best practices say. So it is a little bit more academic, but and it uses quotes from the authors who have been researching transition. And then if you keep scrolling down, you'll get into the artifacts. So the artifacts are either coursework I completed, or there's something that I've just been using for the district, or it's something that, like the I Am Determined website. So those great resources, I kind of collected those and put them on here, depending on which domain. This was kind of a thing for the coursework. It has like specifically what each part of the domain references. So it's a little bit more specific than family involvement. It'll say about like providing information or providing training. So that's just what this part, so if you see coding, that's just what that part's for.
Jaclyn, I love this section. Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between community involvement or family involvement versus community engagement, family engagement when it comes to transition and with disabilities?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of overlap between, because again, it is supposed to be it's a team process, and that is the biggest thing, is you have to have all the different pieces working together in order for transitions to really be effective. So the family involvement, that would be specifically like the parents and the families of students, and their aspect of either working with schools or working with outside agencies. The community involvement would be more of working with those outside agencies. So we have like Whole Person, we have Ability KC, we have Impact. So any of those, we have Priets from Mizzou. Any of those outside agencies will come in, either work with the schools, or they're going to work directly with the families and people with disabilities when they become adults or as they're transitioning to become adults.
Okay.
One thing, I think this was a project for as one of the courses, and so I feel like it's a very good resource, kind of a website linking to another website. So the community resource directory. Okay. So basically I compiled all of, not all, I shouldn't say all, I compiled several of the agencies that are here local to Kansas City or Missouri that provide resources. So if I'm clicking on a community resource directory, depending on what you're looking for, you can see the different agencies. So if we say, let's say employment. So again, it does have a little bit of blurb to explain what the employment is. Again, that was the academic piece of the program. But let me explore resources. There we go. So I clicked on employment. Okay, so employment. So this is a list of contact information or websites and kind of just a short blurb of what each of these agencies do. Now, granted, this is not including every single organization, but it was the ones that I was able to find and locate. And so I also, too, if there was something like the Urban League of Kansas City, they do a lot with employment placement. They're not just for people with disabilities. So if it's not disability specific, I kind of indicated that. But what I like is about this is it kind of puts that information in one place, just like the Transition Academy's goal is to kind of have that information in one place. So if you're looking for a specific thing, you can kind of go through these organizations and then decide which one would be best for your needs. I also on here for this course, the resource matrix. It's a checklist, but if you want to see like, okay, I need a lot. So I want to go to an organization that's going to allow me to get adult services, medical, leisure. I kind of organized this checklist here of which organizations have like multiple purposes. It is a little overwhelming at first, but like for example, the ARC of Missouri, that has adult services, advocacy support, leisure, medical, and youth services. And if there was anything else that didn't fall into those categories, I also listed that. So kind of going back to the original site, and I guess I could post that the secondary one in the chat as well. So another one, we'll go to maybe interagency collaboration. So, because I know we have people from all different parts of the team here. So again, starts with a block. Sometimes I'll add, like if there's a specific model, I'll start with that part. So kind of tying in that research. So here are some different things, like if you are at a school and you do not have pre-employment transition services from MU, I would definitely say you're going to want to contact them because they've been even working with students one-on-one even during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know my representative Terrence, he works with a lot of Kansas City schools, and he's been working with the students to support them even during this time. If you know Tina Glover, this is the Transition Resource Fair that happens every year through the Kansas City Public School District. And yeah, so this is it has kind of your places of who to contact regarding transitions. Again, more from the school lens on this point, but like the Regional Transition Network, that is including like many of the outside agencies that we would say. There's somebody from Whole Person, there's somebody from Goodwill, there's of course school representatives, there's also Job One. So and their meetings, I believe, meet once a month. So it's something, if you wanted to get more involved with that group, you can contact them. But yeah, so in other words, I kind of, with this website that I did, I kind of had to look at most of the different components. And you obviously could dive into one area and probably it would take, an hour or so to digest. Depending on what you're looking for. If you're a school, maybe you're going to focus on the assessment piece. Maybe your school doesn't have an assessment bank. I have a lot of resources for that. So it kind of just depending on what area you're looking for. I probably have some of the research, and then again, not every resource is listed on here, but it's a good starting point, I would say.
You keep going. This is great. I love the way you have it organized, and I'm so used to talking with bureaucrats, and it's so difficult to follow the conversation because of all the jargon and lingo. And so you are really explaining things in a very simplified, easy to follow manner. So if you want to explore other domains, that is fantastic.
See, okay. Another one I had, so career development. And I realize now I should have probably just gone in order, but I wasn't sure how much time, so
that's totally fine.
I kind of starred certain ones like the family involvement and the interagency collaboration. So yes, again, and basically some background on this. I mean, I feel like probably each domain took, probably it was probably like a whole weekend was one domain. So it did take a lot of time to set this up, to, write out the research, to collect all the resources. So it was definitely something that I've spent a lot of time on. So Jaclyn, I am happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay. As we go through domain 6, can you talk through career development versus or career exploration versus career preparation, and kind of how it works, and even timelines, like how it's paced for each individual?
Yes. In fact, I know I have that. Okay, I know there's a link somewhere to a graphic that has, but I will just stick with this one so that way I'm not scrolling as you guys are watching and making me dizzy. So basically career preparation, the 3 phases would be career preparation, career awareness, then career exploration, and then career preparation. So as you can see from this, that career awareness and exploration, that can start in elementary school. We don't have to wait until the student is 16 to expose them to certain skills. As you can see here, I realize you can't see my mouse. So skill development, they have listed certain things are work habits and values. A student can start to learn how to advocate for themselves. They can start to get used to asking for help, even in elementary school, okay? It's going to look different than when they're in high school, but if they start to get into that habit, then they're going to be used to self-advocating. So another thing, they usually, in a lot of elementary schools, they do like the career days. That's all something to expose. So the big idea is when they're younger is to expose them to as many different career options as possible. This also helps families too. If you're starting to think about what you want for your child at a young age, like what do you want for them as they become adults, it'll help you to better prepare. Like if you have to set up an ABLE account, or if you need to set up even just a 529 for college savings. So that all takes preparation and time. A lot of those processes are lengthy, or it takes time to save. So the earlier you can start thinking about it, the better. In middle school is actually when more of the formal transition planning takes place. In Kansas, they actually start at 14 and not 16 in terms of their legal requirements for the IEP, and starting to work on transitions. And that can be, again, some of those things would just be now working on more of those study skills, the time management. Those are all things that, many adults need to work on. So the earlier we can start working on them, the more likely they'll be successful in the career. So those transferable skills, those can start to be worked on at a younger age. In terms of the IEP process, right, it says formal transition planning. So even at middle school, like a student should be able to say what their strengths are and, what helps them. So that's usually, one of the very quick interview questions when you're, going to a job. It's like, what is your strength? What do you need help with? So if we're starting to ask students to be involved in their IEP in middle school, it'll start showing them and the families as well that it's going to help you guys after high school, because they'll start learning how to speak up for themselves. Now that might not be, speaking. It could be that they make a PowerPoint, like the slides. Kids are very good at technology, much better than we are. So, I've seen it where some students, they'll do like a slideshow of, for their IEP meeting, and they'll kind of lead it in that way. Job shadowing can also start in middle school as well. So it's important to get students in the workplace environment, so that way they can start to see what they like and what they don't like about an environment. You'll be able to tell right away if you don't like a noisy environment. There's certain jobs that you just won't want to do. So that job shadowing can start in middle school. In terms of high school, 9th and 10th grade, you're moving to that more intentional career exploration. So I know at our school, we're very involved with Prep KC, so they do career jumping, and we also do college visits starting in 9th and 10th grade. And we have like guest speakers come in to kind of talk about their careers. And we have a freshman seminar course also geared to that, but that's just for all students. By the time they're in 11th and 12th grade, we should really have students in some kind of supported employment. So even if they cannot do like a part-time job on their own, I know that like vocational rehabilitation, they do a junior work experience. It's looking a little different this year, of course, but so it's for students with disabilities, and usually they work with like Ability KC or job one. And so that way they have a job coach. But they're getting that work experience, you know, in their 11th and 12th grade year. Some of the bigger districts, they're able to do work experience programs during the day at school. So it's not even a matter of having to worry about summer. But it just does depend on the district's resources. But like I know Tina Glover, she has students at the VA hospital. And she also, I think this year, is adding a program at the Marriott Hotel. So that 11th and 12th grade year, the more work experience they can get before they leave, the more likely that they're going to either go on to college or have a job after high school. That was a lot, so let me know if I did not answer your question or if you have more questions after that.
This is fantastic. This is, I think so often, because from a parent standpoint, most of the interaction or the directives that come from schools are always based on like federal mandates. And so it's very legalistic. It's not conversational or collaborative like this is, and definitely not the intentionality. And so just showing the intentionality behind successful transition versus what is often done, which is the check the box measure for so that we can just show that we're compliant. This is definitely a welcome shift, and so I love it. I didn't know if you had other pieces or if we could open it up for questions. It's totally up to you, Jaclyn.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I'd say push your schools, like as parents. I mean, really transitions should be driving the IEP at the high school level. So you should be starting, like I know for me, I start by making sure I ask the student, what are your plans for after high school? Now, sometimes they don't know, or they'll say something, you know, very lofty, like a basketball player, which is great if they can make it, but that does happen. And then it's like, well, what do we like about basketball? So kind of starting the meeting with transition, I think, is key. It also sets the tone for the meeting. So if you're starting with what does the kid or what does the student and the family want, it kind of helps the meeting to be more focused on the student and the family's wants. I feel like that shift has helped our meetings to be a little bit less legalistic, but yeah. But yeah, I'd love to answer any questions now.
Awesome. Okay, and let's see, I think maybe we will, let's see, okay. Any questions?
Hi, I have one. What are you doing for transportation? That always seems to be the biggie on the budget when you get kids there. It'll always be an obstacle, but what are you using at this point, or how is you facilitating this?
Yeah, so I mean, transportation is definitely a huge obstacle, and if I had the answer, I'd probably be a multi-millionaire. But our school has, what we're doing is we kind of are combining some of the programs. So we're scheduling them so that way the buses can drop, like, you know, the early college kids off, you know, first, and then they'll take our students to their like manual tech courses. So we're trying to schedule them. It's not a perfect science, but we're trying to schedule it so that way we can reduce the number of buses that we have to use, and the number of, well, the amount of fuel and all of that. So it's not a perfect science. Some of our parents have said, or some of our kids drive themselves to programs. Again, also not ideal, but some of them, they have the cars and they're driving anyway. So they have to check in with the school in terms of attendance. And then if they're not back at a certain time, in terms of liability. So that's how we keep them and make sure they're going to the program. And then we've also tried using the public bus system. It takes a long time. And it doesn't always go where we want to, but we've been trying to find like what's more in the community right around our school, or what can we get to on a bus line, and trying to do our programming that way.
Jaclyn, can you also talk about different transition options for students according to their functioning levels? Of course, there's high functioning, and then there's some students who may be more moderate, and then there's some who may have more severe challenges. Can you talk through some of the strategies and some of the placements that you and families have worked with for students of different functioning levels?
Yeah, so for some of our students who are more moderate, what we did there, we luck out that there is a community center right across the street from us. So we kind of just did it on a volunteer basis. So the students would have jobs there, but they weren't being paid, and then a teacher would go with them to kind of make sure in case there was different needs. So they would walk over together, and they would do that about once a week. Sometimes they would be dusting, sometimes they'd be cleaning, but kind of sometimes they were filing papers. But kind of that exposure to work environment, but they had their teacher that they have all day. They had the life skills teacher with them, and then they would come back to school and they would talk about it that way. Sometimes it was just taking a field trip to a restaurant to practice those the money skills. The life skills teacher that we had, she did a lot. Sometimes we were using the public bus system to get to places. This year we were supposed to, but we'll see if schools open up. But one of our students was going to basically work for our school district. So she was going to work in the cafeteria, the office. We were kind of going to have a rotation of different jobs. So instead of her going to PE and art, for the 5th year, she would be basically working. So she would have her independent living class, but then the rest of the day she would be, doing multiple jobs. And that was going to be just right within the school, because the student is definitely more significant. She doesn't really, she can't communicate. And so, but she likes to interact with people, and she can perform certain tasks. So we were going to, mom did not want her to go to any outside programs. So we found a way where she could still come to the school, but that way she was doing something more meaningful, since this will be her last year, since she'll be turning 21 at the end of next year.
Gotcha. Okay. And what are the challenges for transition and interacting with, whether it's state sanctioned programs or whether they are maybe private employment programs?
Yeah, so I mean, again, a big obstacle, I know Lori already mentioned it, was transportation. How do we get our students to those programs? And then other constraints are time. So our students who are higher functioning, they have to, take a certain number of credits at the high school. So often, sometimes they just don't have it where they could fit in a program during the day. So we're trying to be more intentional of making sure they're getting more of their classes in their 9th through 11th grade. So that way they have those opportunities senior year. But sometimes it's a matter of, the graduation requirements don't allow them to participate during the day. Other things that are obstacles would be, just finding those partnerships. So some people, like the community center, they were fine with, having the students volunteer. But if we wanted to do something where if it was like a work experience and they were getting paid, they didn't want to have the liability for that. So it's finding those partnerships. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult of like which businesses or companies would be open to having students and paying them. Mm-hmm. So, and different companies, it just depends. I mean, their comfort level on what their business model looks like.
Mhm. Okay. So even with that federal law that allows businesses, if they employ someone with a disability, that the federal government will pay their salary the first 2 years, even that is still an obstacle?
Yeah, so even that's an optional. I don't know if it's because the students would be part-time. So I'm wondering if maybe just like it doesn't specifically allow for part-time, or maybe it's because, you know, some of our students are under 18. I'm wondering if
Okay.
that could possibly be, but yeah, I haven't had any businesses actually say, okay, yes, we have that federal program. We're, you know, all for that. So I haven't, usually it's
Mhm.
more of a, would you be willing, and kind of continuing to ask them and build that partnership so we can raise it up each year to that level.
Cool. Oh, and Jaclyn, because you are a teacher as well as a transition expert, I tried to do some research on college and career readiness standards for students with disabilities at the secondary level. And I really couldn't find, I mean, I really couldn't find any like national site that gave guidance to that. There's a plethora of information for general ed students. Any thoughts or on college and career readiness standards for students with disabilities?
So, I mean, I would say that a lot of those standards that they advertise for or they publicize for the general population do apply.
Okay.
So, I mean, I know like Missouri has their specific college and career readiness benchmarks. Um, in terms of specifically for students with disabilities, if, I guess, how should I say? So if they're going to community college, like, you know, they're going to have to do what, you know, the regular general population does. Actually there's, let me find that. So unless they're going to a program like UCM's Thrive or Propel, they are actually going to have to follow the same general expectations as their general peers. Find it. I did put together a brochure of kind of like what to expect in terms of like how does your IEP work in college. Again, it's focused on those students who are going to you know, either a community college or a four-year. Let's see, view brochure. Here it is. Let's see. Oh, stop share. I realized it opened in a different window, so I have to reshare it. There we go. Now you can kind of see. Kind of in terms of, you know, what kind of help, again, those tutoring centers, those writing centers, they're not specifically for students with disabilities, but that would be a key piece if the students are going into college for them to use those things. So kind of here, right, it's on the students to request the accommodations. So there's not going to be somebody who is going to track them. In fact, legally, colleges aren't able to say like, oh, we know you had an IEP in high school, let's get you set up. They're just legally not allowed to do that. So really, the student has to advocate. And if they want parents involved, they have to sign that release, so that way parents can also get that information. Otherwise, technically, colleges won't actually communicate with families. So it's very important if you do have a student that you do sign that release form, so that way you could also help your student But they will always say it's up to the student to do as well. Something that, like, I know in high school, we do we do extended time on everything. That's pretty much, on most, if not all students' IEPs. But in college, kind of in speaking with the disability support people in college, they don't actually give it for assignments. They'll give it for tests, like they'll allow students to take small group, they'll allow students to take tests with extended time. If it needs to be audio, they'll do it for test, but they won't necessarily do it for assignments. So that is a big adjustment. So kind of to your point, I would say having students, even though they have that extended time on assignments in high school, kind of getting them prepared for those deadlines, that those won't be extended. I think that would be a key piece. So especially as your student is going into senior year, maybe encouraging them to get the assignment in at the assigned deadline, because in colleges, they're not going to allow for an extension unless it's, like it won't be part of their accommodations plan.
Okay. Good deal.
Did that answer your question?
It did. It absolutely did. Any other questions? I know I've dominated. You could tell I was waiting for this topic.
Not really a question, but you have great information. It's
Yes.
wonderful. I volunteer with Propel, and actually I have a daughter who has a disability who went through college and has her bachelor's degree, and we didn't have this type of information. She's 29 now. So this information is critical, and I so wish that, the transition piece, we would have started obviously so much, sooner, and I think it's so important for families overall. And once upon a time, we had the ABLE program at the community colleges, which was really helpful, and it supported young adults with disabilities getting through those general ed classes. And so it would be great if there was, something to that degree. But your information and how organized and everything, it's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm with you, Karen. That's what I was thinking. Not only if we had started earlier, but if we had such a clear roadmap like the one that Jaclyn has established.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or feedback? Okay. Well, we want to thank our good friend Jaclyn. Jaclyn and I think we are spirit animals. We had such a great talk, and we have vowed to continue to stay connected. And so this will not be our last time hearing from her. She is she's just a ray of light. And so we are just excited and looking forward to things to come. I wanted to also kind of take us back to kind of the issue at hand. As far as resources this week, I'm definitely going to share Jaclyn's website and as a resource for us. And other than that, I think we're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to be 100% transparent here. I have been struggling with all that's going on in our country in light of the uprising after George Floyd's death. And I think all of our Black families are suffering so often in the disability community. We are very tone deaf when it comes to issues of race. And we kind of live in this kind of little like la 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 world. And so those of us who are Black and who are people of color, a lot of times we put on a brave front, and we don't really openly discuss the struggles of being Black and living with a disability. And we don't really have a space for that. And so I've been struggling, and I know a lot of us have been, just trying to come to terms with all that's going on. And so next week, I am looking to shift gears a bit and to focus on the intersection of race and disability, um, especially in light of the times that we are in. And so anyone who wants to thought partner with me, if you just want to give me a, hey, you go girl, I'm with you, send me a virtual hug, I'll accept that as well. And then I'm not quite sure the format. It may be more of a webinar. I've talked with a few folks on social media. You know, when you're dealing with the millennial generation, you got to meet them where they are. And they are on social media. And I have got a chance to talk with some young people who are very vocal, and they're able to articulate what my son isn't able to articulate. And so I'm really excited about it. Again, I did a search to find out about disabilities and race, and nothing. I mean, if you saw something that was very childlike, and let's look at this book and let's talk about these characters, and so the topic is just long overdue. So I'm hoping that you will join us next week, and that if you have ideas, if you want to thought partner with me, I definitely welcome you. And then also wanted to just continue to share with us that we are still focused and excited about having a virtual celebration for the class of 2020 on the last Friday of the month, which will be June the 26th. We're looking at having the celebration at 11 a.m. and then immediately following, we'll have a transition fair. And we will focus on just introducing students to opportunities according to their interests. And then we'll also definitely make sure that we lead off with not only their interests, but making sure that they have a case manager, and then helping them to kind of navigate those waters. I've heard from a few participants and parents who have said, thank you so much for organizing this. I will, in the recap that I send out tomorrow, I'll send a link so that you all can please share this with families and graduates about how to sign up to participate. And if you are interested in joining us on the steering committee, please let me know. We will be offering stipends to members of the advisory committee. And also, if you are interested in even thought partnering with me on topics that you think that we should consider for Tuesday Talks, please reach out. I'm looking at developing an advisory committee to help us as we grow Tuesday Talks, and making sure that we are really giving our families, our social services partners, our medical partners, all of us who are in the disability space, making sure that we really have a voice and that the content is exactly what we need. Any other feedback, thoughts, questions for the good of the order?
Hi there.
Hi, Crystal.
Hey, hi, Jen.
How are you?
How are you?
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And by all means, be safe, be kind, and let's be good to one another. Thank you very much. And see you this evening if you're able to make it at 6 o'clock for Jaclyn.
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.